Everybody's seen the new Fantastic Four First Steps trailer by now. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater and Fantastic Four Grand Design. As expected, the film seems to have a retro look to it. It's being directed by Matt Shakman, who directed WandaVision, which also had a retro look, leaning into sort of like sitcoms of various eras. This one seems to be modeled after the romantic comedies of the late 50s, early 60s that starred Rock Hudson and Doris Day. And usually there'd be a smaller role in it played by Tony Randall. It has that feel, some of the musical cues, the architecture, the cinematography, maybe even more closely seems to be patterned after Down with Love, starring Renee Zellweger and Ewan McGregor, which itself was a pastiche of those Doris Day, Rock Hudson comedies. You know, feels very, very, very close to that look. As far as what's in the trailer, the first time I saw it, it didn't really do much for me. Sometimes these trailers just really hit you with some, cool moment. That the only moment that kind of stood out to me was when they had the Thing Halloween costumes. That was pretty cool. They had when I was a kid, where it would be this plastic mask and then this vinyl outfit that in a lot of cases just had a picture of the character on it. That was pretty cool. That was pretty nostalgic. Makes me think of another thing in the trailer. There's some things that are just sort of canon to these properties and you don't want to mess around with. And one of them to me is that the Thing, Ben Grimm, is orange. And in this trailer, he was not orange. He was sort of tan. You lose a point for that one. The trailer, it has like one of those sort of cutesy moments where Ben and Herbie the robot are having a little bit of banter, and they're making dinner and stuff. And those sort of cutesy moments, they are part of the formula of the Fantastic Four, but those things kind of drive me up a wall. I'm not a huge fan of those. So maybe it works for somebody else, but that kind of stuff is just sort of a turnoff for me. The car that they were driving around in, that sort of blue Fantastic car, I like the design of that. I don't know what that is, like an Edsel or something, but I like that choice. They're leaning into the blue, which I think is good. The Fantastic Four, it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell to the big public. I mean, this should be a big deal, but yeah, I just don't know. You just think about the Fantastic Four compared to something like, the X-Men. Like, I don't think Fantastic Four sort of, captures the hearts of the audience the way some of these other things do, like Spider-Man or the X-Men or Batman or Superman. There was a really good Fantastic Four cartoon, but it hasn't been aired in a really long time. It probably hasn't aired since in like 30 years. It's not available on streaming. It's not like easily accessible. I think it ran on like Cartoon Network or something, maybe like 25, 30 years ago. And that would be the one from the 60s with designs by Alex Toth. It's a really, first-rate action-adventure cartoon of its era, along the lines of like a Johnny Quest. But yeah, it's just not very well circulated. I never saw it when I was a kid. And then there was the 90s Fantastic Four cartoon that was sort of a companion piece to the X-Men one, but it just pales in comparison to the X-Men one. I don't think it ever developed much of a following, and it's just not very good in comparison. So Fantastic Four, they have their important place historically, and obviously like that Jack Kirby, Stan Lee era of the comic is so influential and just so wonderful. But how do you communicate that to a modern audience? So what we basically get are a lot of the aspects of the Fantastic Four that I feel are sort of a barrier to their wider acceptance. And I've talked about that in other videos. We have Fantastic Four Fridays every Friday. The cutesy, like, we're making dinner together. Oh, I put a little too much garlic in the sauce, that kind of stuff. The Fantastic Four, they're very domestic. They're very domesticated. And this iteration kind of starts out there, and everybody seems kind of middle-aged. Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, they kind of read as sort of middle-aged. They're sort of they seem, to be this couple that have been together forever. And I understand that was part of WandaVision also, but WandaVision followed a series of Avengers movies where you saw the romance and courtship of Scarlet Witch and the Vision. And I feel like they're doing themselves a disservice if we're being introduced cinematically to the Fantastic Four and they're this couple that have been together forever, and like, give us a little bit of that romance, give us a little bit of that courtship. It's just a tough sell for something that is ostensibly a youth driven thing, sort of superhero comics as sort of a youth culture, and then action adventure movies being sort of a youth driven thing. I don't know. To me, it's a tough sell. Here's this middle-aged couple and their grouchy best friend, and then their spoiled teenaged or early 20s brother/brother-in-law. Like, even Johnny seems to be from the perspective of an older person. It's not a teenager or a young man from the perspective of youth. It's sort of a teenager or young man from the perspective of middle age, where it's like, oh, he's just laying on the couch all day. He's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. I realize that when I see these trailers, that's not really an indication of what the movie's going to be like. So I'm going to be in line for the new Fantastic Four movie. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to try to see it opening night if possible. I am excited about it, even if I'm not necessarily excited about this trailer or what I've seen of it. Matt Shakman, the director, was reported to have purchased a copy of my book, Fantastic Four Grand Design. So I hope, I have some influence on the finished product. I hope some of the things that I presented in my book, some of the ideas make their way into the movie. I feel like that's probably unlikely, because when he purchased it, the film was pretty far into development. So I feel like, the overall design sense had already been arrived at by that point. And certainly the story, but you never know. They do reshoots, they do last minute stuff, so maybe some stuff will end up in there from my book. You briefly see Galactus in the trailer. You're sort of looking down at Galactus. You see Galactus from like just very briefly from the back, but you're looking down at Galactus, and I feel like you should never be looking down at Galactus, and certainly not in his first appearance. When you first see Galactus, you should be looking up. He should fill the sky. You should be in awe of him. So he just seemed kind of like matter of fact, just sort of stuck in there from this sort of, helicopter view looking down at Galactus. Like, nothing should be higher than Galactus in terms of staging or cinematography. When Galactus is defeated, or when, he's starting to get weakened or something, then you can start looking at him from above. But I feel like that was a little bit of a misstep there. You briefly see John Malkovich. We're to assume that he's going to be playing the Red Ghost along with his super apes, who is, one of the early Fantastic Four villains. Watch the Fantastic Four-idays video where we talk about that first appearance. Inked by Steve Ditko. It's a really great looking issue. Pedro Pascal, I think he is great casting for this. I think he's a terrific actor. The Mandalorian is just amazing. One note that I have for his performance as Reed is he seems to be a similar approach that Benedict Cumberbatch had with Doctor Strange, where Benedict Cumberbatch decided to go for sort of like a Midwestern American accent. And so, this guy who, can speak, has this very sort of commanding voice as Sherlock. When you sort of translate that into American Midwest, it kind of makes him sound kind of wimpy. He's like, yeah, it's me, Dr. Strange. I'm from Wisconsin. And Pedro Pascal, his voice, like, that's not how he talks. When he's in The Mandalorian, he's got kind of a gruff voice. For some reason, again, contributing to the sort of middle-aged, domesticated flavor that the Fantastic Four seem to be stuck with. To me, that's not a necessary ingredient. You can find ways to make the Fantastic Four very vital, exciting, sexy, mysterious. But for some reason, they feel like that Norman Rockwell aspect is essential, that you can't play with that, or you can't take that out. And so Pedro Pascal seems to be speaking in kind of a voice, hello, I'm Reed Richards, and this is what, what would be wrong with Reed Richards talking like the Mandalorian, or at least somewhere in that neighborhood. That's my take on it. More stuff like the Ben Cooper Thing costumes. I want more stuff like that, and maybe less non-orange Thing, and a little less of the domestication stuff. But I feel like, again, coming from a WandaVision direction, they probably are leaning into that aspect, sort of like 50s sitcom. I do wonder like what the appeal is there. I mean, again, these are very old references. They're before my time, and I'm probably a little bit beyond the target demographic for a movie like this. My prediction time, just making predictions. I think this movie will underperform, maybe even be a bomb when you sort of compare it to the cost of the production. I don't want it to bomb. I want it to. I want there to be more Fantastic Four movies. I hope it doesn't bomb, but that's just movie attendance is tricky. There are sort of these mega hits that have been coming around, things like Wicked, but I don't know that Fantastic Four has that. I don't know that Fantastic Four is going to be one of those. I think it might fall into the category of the majority of movies where, it's not enough to get people to leave their homes and go see. It's been a while since I've seen a Marvel movie that really blew me away. On the other hand, I think that the new Captain America is going to be very big, and I think, again, it's got so many things going for it, but it is building on something that's already been pretty wildly successful, and where Fantastic Four, it's been a rough road for the Fantastic Four in terms of the movies, the comics, the cartoons. Again, when you have something where its best days were in the 1960s, when its best days were at a time when the majority of the audience, myself included, didn't exist yet, that's tough. That's tough. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Godzilla's Monsterpiece Theater and Fantastic Four Grand Design, which is coming back to stores in anticipation of this new Fantastic Four movie. So please check it out.